Welcome to module 6 lecture 1. In the module 5 we discussed about organization design, structure. We also learned about coordination, differentiation and integration. We also looked at multiple differentiation and integration. Today we are going to go to the next module. This module is going to talk about a span of management, and it is also talking about centralization and decentralization. Today we are going to discuss about concept, types and importance and process of span of management. Let us get into the lecture. Now let us try to understand what is this span of management. Maybe some of you, it may be a very fresh concept, you would have heard about it. Let us try to learn what is the span of management is. Span of management refers to the number of subordinates in an organization who can be managed efficiently by a superior. It is very simple. Let us consider that you are a manager. If you are a manager, how many subordinates you will be able to control or you will be able to supervise, that is actually being defined as a span of management, meaning that it is very simple form. Let us say you are a manager, okay, you are a manager here, okay. Now the span of management actually tries to tells you, okay, how many subordinates you will be able to manage as a manager. So it can be X, Y, Z, maybe 3% or maybe A, B, C, D, E. So if as a manager, if you are able to control this become a span of management. Sometimes if you are able to control or supervise 5 people manage under you, it can be, sometimes it can also together, all of them together you will be, if you are able to control, then that is also span of management. But again depends on, it is actually span of management tells you that now how many subordinates a manager is able to supervise, manage or control them. Okay, this is called a span of management. As a concept, this is called a span of management. Okay. Now let us try to understand bit more about this concept. Okay. So it is simply a system in which manager having a group of subordinates who report him directly is called a span of management. The span of management or a span of control is actually a dimension of organizational design measured by number of subordinates that report directly to a given manager. See, the span of management is also related, most of the time it is related to a organizational structure or a design perspective, because organization design and the structure actually decides, okay, how many people will report to one manager. That actually decides how many levels a company should have or an organization should have. For example, let us say you have 15 people in a company. Let us say one manager is able to control only 5, let us say they become a supervisor, then another 5 is able to manage another 10 people below them. Then what is happening, you are actually creating a structure and you are actually creating different levels in the company. That is why span of management is also one of the dimensions of an organizational design in an organization. This term span of management is also referred as a span of control. Maybe somebody would have heard about span of control, maybe span of management you would never heard about it, but span of control, yes, you would have heard about it. Span of supervision, span of authority or a span of responsibility. It indicates the number of subordinates who under a single reporting authority or like the manager or CEO, whoever it may be, right. Maybe under a CEO you will have chief officers, chief technology officer, chief operating officer, chief financial officer, CFO, COO, CMO, CTO, all these people will be working under a CEO. So now CEO span of management goes only to these 4. For example, chief technology officer, CTO, COO, chief operating officer and chief financial officer. So this become a span of management. For example, for a manager, let us say he manages 4 team leaders. Now all team leaders will be reporting to the manager. Now what is the span of management for this particular manager? It is team leader 1, team leader 2, team leader 3 and team leader 4. That becomes a span of management for a particular manager. So this is a concept of span of management. Now let us try to understand different types of span of management. Okay. So depending on the number of employees that can be supervised or controlled by a manager, there can be 2 kinds of structures in the organization. One is a tall structure. See, the tall structure, even in the organizational structure also we discussed about bit about this tall structure and a flat structure. Now what is a tall structure? This structure, tall structure is nothing but in an organization you will have multiple levels, right. So let me call it, this is level 1, okay, level 1, you come down, it will have level 2, okay, then it will level 3 and level 4. So it goes on like this, okay, level 5. Now this structure we call it as a tall structure, because one becomes another, becomes superior to this person level 5 and level 3 becomes superior to level 4. This is tall structure. There is a different high, more number of levels exist in the organizations. So these kind of structures are found in classical bureaucratic organizations. So if if you happen to visit government organizations, or if you're already working in a government organizations, you would have already seen this kind of a structure where there is a tall structure where there are so many superiors. Maybe if you have submitted some of the documents in a government organizations, you would have found that many people used to sign, right? So many people used to sign, and then you say now your file has been moved to the next table and it has to move to the different table, meaning that there is a tall structure where there are many levels are coming up. In this structure, manager will supervise less number of subordinates. Very simple, because these levels are really high, and then tall structure there are so many levels. What will happen, each level one manager or one superior will have to manage only few number of employees. So meaning, for example, maybe one employee, one manager maybe have to control only 2-3 people. So that is actually creating, since you're only controlling 2-3 people, so the structure, the levels are increasing, the tall structure, so the span of management is very narrow, because you are actually controlling very less number of people, right? So but in the tall structure, what can happen generally is, because you are actually managing very less number of people, there is a tight control over their activities, because since you are only managing 2-3 people, you have enough time, or a sufficient time, or adequate time, whatever you call it, you will be able to exercise on the subordinates under you, because you will be supervising more often, and then you will be intervening, executing, and then you will be controlling, directing this type of employees under you, so that there will be a tight control over their activities. Now let us go to the flat structure. What is a flat structure? So here in this flat structure, so generally what happens in the flat structure is, here there is a wide span of control. Why do we call wide span of control? One supervisor maybe supervises a large number of subordinates. So that's a flat structure. So this let me put it in a simple form. Okay, let's say he is a manager. Okay, you are a manager. Now under you, let me call 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now if you see, as a manager, you are able to control this many people. That become a flat structure, because for example in a tall structure, what you have seen, it is only 3 people. Let's say here it is 3. Now 4, 5, 6 and 7, 8 become the below. This become a tall structure, this become a flat structure. Okay, so you are able to try to distinguish between the tall structure and a flat structure. Flat structure, what will happen? You have a wide span of control, because you are controlling so many people, whereas in the tall structure you are only controlling few number of people. Tall structure. Okay, so means you will be able to exercise more tight control on these employees, whereas in a flat structure, what will happen, you are able to, you need to control 8 people, so it may not be that tight control, because you need to look at all 8 people and you need to supervise all 8. You may not be able to spend more time closely with these number of employees or the subordinates under you. Okay, so now we have understood about the two structures, flat and tall structure. Let us try to understand more about these structures. Okay. Now before we go and understand between these flat and tall structures, let us try to understand the importance of span of management. Why as an organization we need to worry about the span of management? As a company, they know it is easily, whichever company they can decide on their own, but it is very important to understand why the span of management is important. Okay. So but of course span of management varies with respect to different organization structure of the organizations, and needs of the organization most often decide the kind of span of management organization is going to set up. The span of management affects the efficient utilization of the management and effective performance of their subordinates, because sometimes what happens, more wide span may mean that manager may be overstraining themselves, because let's say I need to control so many people, I need to overstrain, I need to stretch myself to a large extent to try to control. Sometimes that will create a lot of stress on you, pressure on you, and then moreover when you have a wide span of management, when you're talking about a flat structure, if it is very wide, what will happen? The subordinates receive very little guidance and control. For example, whereas in a short span of control or a small span of control, what will happen, since the number of subordinates under you is very less, the subordinates will be able to get lot of inputs and guidance from the manager, whereas in the other case, if there is a wide span of control, what will happen, the manager may not be able to give sufficient time to guide the subordinates, right? So On contrary, too narrow spans, the manager will be able to provide more. And sometimes what will happen, manager manager capacity really high, but they are only given 3 people to control. They are sometimes underutilized, right? Subordinates are over controlled, since only few people all the time they will interfere, supervise, they give directions every time. So that will actually exercise a lot of control over them. And at the other end, what will happen now, the highly qualified managers, they feel they're underutilized, because I need to manage only 3 people, but I have a capacity where I can manage 7 to 8 people, but instead I'm managing only 3 people. So now the relationship between span of management and organizational structure. The narrow span of management is a tall structured organization, has many supervisions between top management and low level employees, right? So when I have a tall structures, what will happen, there are many levels, and then you need to supervise. The top management is sitting at the somewhere on the top, maybe at the one level, and then where if you look at the lower level of employees, 8 levels below, then this a lot of communications, and there is a cost involved, right? Because if you are having so many levels and structures in your organizations, what will happen, you need to create a proper communication structure. Sometimes there can be poor communication can happen, lack of communication might impact your company. At the same time, you need to also increase the cost, because you are creating many levels. The moment you are creating many levels, definitely cost associated with it is always coming up, because for example, you need to hire more managers for each level to manage this set of subordinates working at that particular level. On the other hand, a wide span for the same number of employees, limited supervision and cost effective, because wide span, what will happen, you have one manager who is controlling 8 people, so you are actually paying for one manager, whereas in the tall structure, every level you need to have some supervisor to control them, so you need to hire them, pay them, so there is a cost, right? Then now let us try to understand what are the factors which are going to influence the span of management. First, the very first one is competence of the manager. The competence of the manager, the capability and ability of the manager, right? If a manager is competent in their job, they can have a wide span of management, right? Because as a manager, I'm really capable, I have a lot of ability to control or supervise let's say 8 to 10 people, so I can have a wide span of control. In case of competence of the manager is low, then you cannot have a wide span of management. You need to have a narrow span of management, then you need to create many levels, or you will at least need to hire many managers to control the large number of employees, so there is a cost. So competence of the manager is judged by the ability to make decisions related to motivational plan, leadership styles, communication channels, change and techniques of control. Okay. Then second one is nature of work. See, the kind of a job being done by the employees. If the employee performs a similar or repetitive job, right, the manager can supervise large number of people, because there is no innovations or no need for creativity to bring in. It is only a repetitive job, monotonous job. You go just see, for example, assembling. If you go to a company where you sit only, they do assembling or packaging sections, they do day in and day out, they are repeatedly doing the same job. Then in that case, you don't need to have many supervisors. Rather you have one supervisor to control 20, 50, 30 people, because they are going to repeat the same job. It is easy for one person to supervise, because by the time that they do repeatedly, they become expert in doing that particular job, so it is easier. Whereas if you look at creative jobs, non-repetitive jobs, there is a lot of challenges or more volatility, and you need to work vibrantly, then you need to have a less span, a narrow span of management, because you cannot just let it go, because it will have a lot of impact on the company. Then assistants to manager. If a manager have access to technical or secretarial assistants, then he or she can actually manage a large number of subordinates, right? Because I have some assistants who can provide me technical support to my subordinates, who can provide more information about what is the work going and what level of job being done by my subordinates. Then it manager can go for a large span of control, so I can have more people, because I have some secretarial assistants who can time to time feed me with a lot of information and technical support. So so staff assistants can be very useful for collecting and processing information related to various decision making, right? So then the manager can have a wide span of management. Then competence of subordinates. See, in a team, if the team members are really competent enough to manage the day-to-day affairs, and then they are really agile, and then they are really capable, competent enough to handle their jobs, and take the let's say there is a query comes up from the clients, they are able to respond to the client on their own, considering the business situations. Then if they are really competent, so then manager can take that as a leverage, and then go for a wide span of management. In case if my team members are dependent, are not that really competent, they need always directions, they need always inputs and informations, then in that case it is very difficult to go for a wide span of management. Rather you go for a narrow span of management, because you need a manager or you need some level of people superior to give them time to time instructions, informations, directions, so that they're performing better, right? Yeah. Then plans and policies. If an organization has a clear set defined policies, when the rules and guidelines is able to guide or govern the people, and if the rules existing, it can guide the people what they have to do in a critical situations, or let's say if you wanted to take a decision, if there is a laid down rules, you can just simply go refer to the policy book or the rule book. If you're able to do, in that case you can have a wide span of management, because though manager has a certain responsibility towards delivering information or sharing information, but of course the defined policies and rules will be taking care of the most of the time, so it is easier, right? There is a more clarity on kind of a job to be done, what has to be done and what circumstances, so the rules and guidelines will provide more information. So in that case organization go for a wide span of management. If the policies are not that well established, not collectively made, then in that case it is better to go for a narrow span of management. Then organization level. So top executives look after important and specialized activities, therefore the span is narrow at the top level, and low level the span can be wide, since supervisors mainly concern the routine jobs. See the organization, the type of level you are talking about, right? So as I said in the beginning, there are CEOs will have a very narrow span of management. The reason being because as I said, CEO has to let's say CEO has a responsibility, let's say CEO, right? Okay, now let me talk about CEOs and a span of management. This is at the top level, right? On a top level, the span of management simply chief technical officer, okay, chief operating officer, chief financial officer. Most of the organization will have these three roles. Now the span of management for the CEO is very simple. So he will report to CEO, he will report to CEO, he will report to CEO. The span of management is very simple, it is very narrow. Whereas if you are looking at a supervisor at the shop floor, let's say talk about a some automobile industry. So supervisor in the production floor, what will happen? Under the supervisor there will be a shop floor. So how many people generally work? On an average at least minimum 30 to 40 people working in a one shop floor, right? So let's say supervisor has to handle 30 to 40 people here, right? Now what happens? His span of control is wide, whereas here at the top level it is narrow, because CEO top level you need to manage only a few number of employees. So that's why in the top level it is always narrow, and then the lower level if you go down it becomes wide. Okay. Yeah. So apart from these factors, what are the other factors which is going to influence what kind of a span of management a company has to have? So okay, next is authority and responsibility structure. If an authority and responsibility structure, it's very similar to rules and policies. If it is well defined and understood, superior can supervise large number of subordinates. In case if there is a ambiguity, there is no clarity on the delegation of authority and then accountability of each of these employees, then it is very difficult to have a narrow span of control, wide span of management. So then you need to go for a narrow span of management. Then system of control. If there is an established effective system existing on the control system, then manager can supervise many people. For example, let's say in the coding or the software fields, if there is an error occurs, and if you just feed the informations, if there is inconsistency, or it will always show up a dialog box and say there is an error, and then error also will tell you that what is the error is. So in that kind of an automated system of control exists, what will happen? In that particular it is automatically taken care, right? Those deficiencies in the job is being taken care, automations, right? There is a control. In that situations, one manager can handle many employees. In case if there is, for example, there is no automatic pop-up dialog which is not coming in the place, so what will happen? So you will input the feed, then you will find out that the result output is not coming, then you need to go talk to your manager. In that situations, manager cannot handle so many employees, right? They need to have a very less number of employees. So system of control is also very important. Though if you have a very effective system of control, then you don't need to you can go for a large span of management, because there are a lot of centralization, decentralization, because people manage their activities on their own. Then financial factors. So both narrow and wide structures have financial constraints. So how do we say financial constraints? A narrow span requires more managers, so that it is costly to form a structure. So it's very simple, right? There are many levels, each level will get their own supervisor or the manager, right? So then there is a cost, right? You need to pay the manager more. And wide span on the other hand may result in organizational inefficiency. What happened in the wide span? So maybe one manager is handling large number of employees, but there can be a inefficiency by these employees, because this manager is not able to provide a specific input, or not able to provide more time or more input, more information to their employees. This can result into organizational inefficiency. Maybe the output, maybe the quality of the output may be poor, may be low, so that will actually impact the organization's business itself. So both the span of management while will have definitely some financial constraints. So based on the kind of a financial situations your company is managing, you will go for it. For example, there is a if there is a lot of financial restrictions on spending on human resources, what will happen now? The company are forcibly to have to go for a wide span of management, because I cannot have many managers, because as a company I do not have the budget to pay my managers, so I will go for a less number of managers. I in turn I ensure that these managers taking care of large number of employees, so they will go for a wide span of management. Then what are the advantages of the span of management and tall structures? Now we are going to the two structures, tall and flat structure. The advantages of in the tall structure, close supervisions, because you will have only few subordinates to supervise, so they will have a close supervisions. They will provide time to time inputs, right? So they will be able to closely work with the subordinates. This will also provide them a lot of opportunity to bring them or develop this set of subordinates to make them as a manager. So there is a close connections between the manager and the subordinate. Now, effective communications. Since there is only few people to communicate, so there can be better communication among superiors and subordinates, because there is a frequent interactions, transactions between the manager and the subordinate. So the communication will be better, the relationship will also be better, right? So building better relationship. So it promotes personal relationship amongst superiors and subordinates, because as the number of subordinates is very less, the relationship bond will be very high. They spending time together, they are able to closely work, and then there is a very less number of people. There will be more number of interactions happening between the manager and the subordinate, so there will be a better relationship. Then effective control, as in it's very simple, because there is a less number of people, so there is a more control, they will be able to exercise more control. There is an effective control. When there is even when a small deviation happens, the manager is able to identify, right? So that's the advantages of in a short tall structure where there is a very narrow span of management, because only few people, even the small deviations, manager is able to recognize it, and then he or she will be able to address the inconsistency or inefficiency. Now, so what are the disadvantages? Of course, we talked about advantages, definitely it also comes with certain disadvantages. So in the tall structure, what happens? It creates many levels in the organization structure, which complicates coordination among levels. As I said, there are many levels. When you have more levels, it is actually increasing the complexity of coordination. As we in the last module we talked about coordination, differentiation, integrations. So when the moment there is a more levels, everybody have to work towards the organization goal, then there is a more need for you to coordinate, and the complexity increases, right? Then more managers needed to supervise the subordinates. This increases overhead expenditure, right? The salary has to be paid for each manager. For example, let's say one level you have let's talk about a company where in one level you have 200 employees, okay? So as per the organization structure, you are a tall structure, you are actually trying to manage 5 people for under a leader. Then what will happen? You eventually have to have how many people, like 5, so you need to have 40 supervisors to manage 200 people, so it becoming very difficult. So then it is actually increasing the cost. Then increasing gap between top management and workers slows the communication process, because as the tall structure, the top management sits at the top, and then there will be many levels to reach the lower level of employees. So what will happen? The communication process, let's say somebody at the lower level of employee has to pass on some information to the top management. It has to move to each level to reach the top. By the time it reaches, it's very slow, right? So the expectations of the lower level employees, they will be disappointed, because they have to wait till the response flows from the top, right? then decision making becomes difficult because of too many levels. Sometimes there are decision making levels, it will have some difficulties because there are many levels. Let's say if let's say you are in this level and then here is a top management, right? So at this level, at the lower level, you wanted to make some decisions. So what happens eventually, what will happen if you want to make some decision, it has to get approval from the one level up, then another level up and another level up. So means it is going to take a long of time. So decision making is not faster, it's always slower, right? Superiors perform routine jobs of supervising the subordinates and have less time of strategic matters, because no, they will just only supervise the people. They do not get engaged in the strategic matters. They don't engage in the decision making process or the contribution towards the setting the organizational structures. So employees work under a very strict control of superiors, because the narrow span of management, there is no freedom provided to these subordinates, because these managers, as only few people to supervise, they will exercise a lot of power. They provide instructions, so and then decision making is primarily centralized. Okay, so there is no scope for creativity and innovation to come in, because the manager all the time overrule them. Okay, these are the disadvantages. Now let us try to understand the advantages of the flat structure. Okay, so low cost compared to the tall structure, because it's only few levels, and then it is easy to pay them, because there is no differentiation of the cost, because as the tall structure you need to pay people at every level, you need to pay a little higher than the previous level. So there is a cost, whereas in the flat structure, low cost, as the less number of manager can supervise the organization activities, and then decision making process is effective, as superiors delegate authority to subordinates, because as the one manager has to manage so many employees. So what will happen, manager generally delegates a lot of responsibilities to the subordinates, so they are relieved of routine matters and concentrate on the strategic matter. What will happen, because as I delegated the responsibility and authority to my subordinates, so I focus on the prospect of the company. I will participate in the decision making matters or strategic matters in the company, and decision making is decentralized, because they delegate responsibility and authority. The decision making happens at the employee level, not at the manager level, and subordinates perform work efficiently, since they are considered worthy of doing so by the supervisors. And there is an effective communication, as the number of level is very less, because the communication gap, there is no much scope for the communication gap, because there are only very few levels. I mean, the very few level, you don't see that information being distorted. There is a less distortion of communication happens, so it is actually being easily passed. And it promotes innovative abilities of the top management, because the lot of participation happens at the subordinate levels, and there is a more scope for innovations and creativity to happen. Okay, yeah. Then what are the disadvantages? Of course, though there are advantages of the flat structure, but some disadvantages also comes with the flat structure. So superior cannot closely supervise the activities, as in the tall structure. What I said, even a small deviations, that the signal will be easily absorbed by the manager, because he has to manage only few people. Whereas in this case, what happens, superiors cannot pay close attention, because they have to manage so many people. So maybe by the time the deficiency or the deviations becomes larger, that time only this manager will take a cognizance of the issue. So that is a challenge. So manager may find it difficult to coordinate the activities of the subordinates, since there is so many employees under them to supervise. So there is a lot of time required to manage the coordinations, or sometimes they find it very challenging to do it. And then subordinate have to be trained, because there are a lot of delegations of responsibility and authority happens. The moment you are able to delegate, then the decentralization, the decision making happens. Obviously you need to train them, unless otherwise you don't train them, so it will actually impact, because you cannot let it, just like that you cannot let it go, because it is going to impact your organization productivity. You need to train them, so that they will also learn how to make the decisions. Now we learned about both the structures and advantages and disadvantages. So of course both have some of the positive and negative features. It is difficult to find exact number of subordinates that a manager can effectively manage. So it is very difficult, because we said so many factors influence to make decision on what kind of a span of management I can go for. So maybe multiple factors, sometimes competency of the manager, sometimes the competency of the subordinate. Let's say you decide that the competence of the manager is really high, and then you made wide span of management. Then if your subordinates are really incompetent, then there is too much of load on the manager, right? Then you need to have narrow span of management. So it is very difficult to make a judgment, but now it is idiosyncratic. What is it meaning? That you need to make time based on the organization, based on the kind of task, based on the kind of a project you work on, the span of management has to be decided. You cannot have a single solution to fit the all probable perspectives. It is better that you make a calculated effort for each organization kind of a project you take. So and span of control and organizational efficiency are not related. Many empirical studies have proved that span of control is situational and depends on a variety of factors. As we said, it based on various factors, what kind of a span of management you can go for. For example, you talked about rules and regulations, efficient control system, automations are coming up now. So in that development, technological advancement, it is always better that you will have a narrow structure, because technology is doing the rest of your job. Then you can go for a narrow structure, because let's say now you have a ERP system, enterprise resource planning, where everything is collected at one go, and then everybody can access information about all employees in that kind of a network structures, where you can go for a wide span of control, because through this kind of technological advancement we are able to control large number of employees. So based on the kind of a system you have, kind of a technological advancement you have, and again the competency of the manager is to be considered to decide what kind of a span of management you can go for. Okay, so today we learnt about the span of management as a concept, and then we also discussed about the type of span of management, and we also seen the advantages and the disadvantages. Okay, the next lecture we will be discussing about the centralization and decentralization. Thank you.